So this sermon series that we're in on the book of James is all about religion for real life. Right? If we want our Christianity to be as real and relevant as the Christ whom we follow, then it must be something that we live and not just something we say with our words. So let us pray. Holy God, we pray, asking as always that you would speak to us, that you would open our ears to hear, and our hearts, most of all, to receive your word in all of its transforming power, making us receptive not just to these words on the page, but to your Spirit within us, forming us more into the image of Christ, in whose name we pray. Amen. James chapter 3, verses 1 to 12. Not many of you should become teachers, my fellow believers, because you know that we who teach will be judged more strictly. We all stumble in many ways. Anyone who is never at fault in what they say is perfect, able to keep their whole body in check. When we put bits into the mouths of horses to make them obey us, we can turn the whole animal. Or take ships as an example. Although they are so large and are driven by strong winds, they are steered by a very small rudder, wherever the pilot wants to go. Likewise, the tongue is a small part of the body, but it makes great boasts. Consider what a great forest is set on fire by a small spark. The tongue is also a fire, a world of evil among the parts of the body. It corrupts the whole body, sets the whole course of one's life on fire, and is itself set on fire by hell. All kinds of animals, birds, reptiles, and sea creatures are being tamed and have been tamed by mankind, but no human being can tame the tongue. It is a restless evil, full of deadly poison. With the tongue, we praise our Lord and Father, and with it we curse human beings who have been made in God's likeness. Out of the same mouth come praise and cursing. My brothers and sisters, this should not be. Can both fresh water and salt water flow from the same spring? My brothers and sisters, can a fig tree bear olives or a grapevine bear figs? Neither can a salt spring produce fresh water. Again, this is the word of the Lord. So St. Francis of Assisi, about 1,000 years ago, is often credited with saying, "Preach the gospel at all times, and when necessary, use words." Now, interestingly, this priest probably didn't actually say that, but he did say something to the same effect. What he wrote once was, "It is no use walking anywhere to preach unless our walking is our preaching. I desire this privilege from the Lord to convert the world rather by example than by word." Francis himself was an excellent preacher. He was all about preaching and about the Word of God, but he knew that words alone were not enough. Now, 1,000 years before that, James, the disciple of Jesus, wrote this letter to some of the early churches that were scattered outside Jerusalem. And in our passage this morning, James also understood that teaching about Jesus with words alone was not enough. In fact, he understood that words alone can be quite dangerous and can actually hinder our message, which is why he said, "Not many of you should become teachers, because you know that we who teach are going to be judged more strictly. We all stumble. Anyone who's never at fault in what they say is perfect, able to keep their whole body in check." In other words, we all stumble, we all sin, we all mess up, but stumbling with our words is particularly dangerous. If we could control our words better, James says the rest of our life would be perfect. That's how powerful our words can be. They are so powerful, in fact, that words can create the world. Words have the power to create the world we live in. James illustrates how the bit in a horse's mouth can direct the entire animal. or the rudder on a ship can steer the entire thing. Likewise, he says, the tongue is a small part of the body, but it makes great boasts. Words seem small, right? Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can never hurt me. Yeah, but they do. They can. Words seem small, but they are powerful enough to create the world. Now, of course, when I say that, only God's word can create the physical stuff of this world. In Genesis, it says that God spoke, and there was light. God spoke, and there was land, and there was water, and the animals, and then finally us. All that happened by God's word, and of course, we can't speak matter into being, but our words are still capable of creating the world as we know it and creating our experience of the world. Our words are powerful enough to create reality and shape the conditions in which we and other people live. James says they can even determine the entire course of our lives. I came across a great story the other day. More than a century ago, there was a young man named Josip Broz. He had the honor of serving as the altar boy at his small church in Croatia. And his job was to take this glass cruet of wine and hand it to the priest so that he could go through with the Mass. But something terrible happened. He dropped the cruet of wine onto a marble floor, and it shattered, and the wine went everywhere. And the poor boy was mortified, and he wasn't helped by the fact that instantly the priest instinctively slapped him across the face, hissed into his ear, "Get out of here, don't ever come back." And he never did. He never went back to any church anywhere. Years later, he would emerge on the international stage as Marshal Tito, the totalitarian dictator who ruled Yugoslavia for about 30 years. But at about the same time, actually here in the United States, a similar drama was being played out. An altar boy at St. Mary's Cathedral in Peoria, Illinois, was chosen to present the cruet of wine to a visiting bishop, so an even more prestigious job. And the same exact thing happened. It slipped from his fingers, and the wine cruet shattered on the floor. Years later, as a grown-up, he would write about this moment, and he said, "There is no atomic explosion that can equal the intensity of decibels in the noise and explosive force of a wine cruet falling on a marble floor of a cathedral in the presence of a bishop." He said, "I was frightened to death." But this time, the bishop, whose name was John Spalding, looked at the boy with a smile, kind of a twinkle in his eye, and he whispered to him, "Don't worry, one day you will be just as I am." And he was right. That altar boy would go on to become Archbishop Fulton J. Sheen. He would write 50 books, and he was a pioneer in Christian television programming in the United States with his weekly show called Life is Worth Living. The words we speak can utterly change the course of people's lives. Our words create the world we live in. Words have the power to bless and the power to curse. They have the power to encourage or discourage. Words can educate or they can perpetuate ignorance. Words can start and stop wars. They can start or split churches. They can swear in or impeach presidents. With words, we solemnize marriages, we coronate kings, and we pledge our ultimate allegiance. Our words can lift people up, or they can tear people down. They have immense power to create the world that we live in, for good or for evil. And James says, unfortunately, it's mostly for evil. He pulls no punches here. He says the tongue is a restless evil. Now, given how powerful words are, you would think that we would use them sparingly and that we would be very careful before we decide what to say, but we aren't and we don't. Not most of the time. We are far too eager to speak. Our tongues are restless, often spouting off before we even have time to consider the consequences of what we are about to say. And the internet has not helped. The internet has given all of us a platform to say whatever we want, to whomever we want, about anything we want. Suddenly we have this dangerous platform and even more opportunities to speak before we've thought it through. It's estimated that the internet has about 30 trillion words on it right now. To put that in perspective, if you were to print them all out back to back with no spaces in Times New Roman size 12 font, the string of letters would reach to the sun and back twice. Or if you took a trip from Lemoore to New York, you could do that there and back 64,000 times. That's how many words are on the internet right now. And more, billions more, are piling up every week. Words are used so carelessly. There are so many of them, and some of them do good. James wants to remind us that most of them, a lot of them, do a great deal of harm because we all stumble, because we are not perfect, because we are all sinners, and we are not as correct as we like to think that we are. So I am convinced that what is needed more than ever is silence. James doesn't actually talk about silence in this passage, but he infers the need for it. What we need more than ever is silence, because silence is how we give our tongues a rest. Part of why they are evil is because they are restless. We just keep talking. We just keep saying things, but if we give them a rest through silence, then we are more likely to bless instead of curse when we speak. James says toward the end, out of the same mouth come praise and cursing. My brothers and sisters, this should not be. There shouldn't be this duplicity from the same mouth. So we need to give our tongues a rest. We need silence so that we are more likely to bless when we do speak instead of cursing. And the reason is simple. Silence gives us time to listen, specifically to God's word and also to each other. Silence is what allows God to speak into our hearts and fill them with His love and His mercy. Silence allows the volume of God's word to rise above all of the harsh, angry, vindictive, and presumptive words that we carry inside of us. In silence, we hear God's still, small voice. And when we hear that voice and our hearts are filled with God's word and with God's love, our words and our voice start to change. Jesus once said it's out of the overflow of the heart that the mouth speaks. So it has to start here, by listening and letting God's word permeate all the way into here. The quality of our words just reflects the condition of our heart, and the condition of our heart is much improved through silence and listening. Now, silence is simple. It's not complicated. It's just silence. But it's not easy, is it? Silence is simple, but it is not easy. Silence is a lost discipline. It's countercultural. It flies in the face of our word-filled world, especially when people are demanding to hear what we think about something. We feel compelled to share it. Silence is not easy. There's a great episode of The Crown where Queen Elizabeth tells her son Charles that to say nothing is the hardest job of all. And yet that's also what is the most necessary at times. Silence is far more necessary than words. Silence is precisely what we need more of. We need to spend more of our time saying nothing. Our world needs people who are quicker to listen than they are to speak. Now, I know how hard that can be. I know how hard it is to keep silent when someone hurts you, when someone insults you. I know how hard it is to keep silent when there's injustice in the world. I'm not saying we don't do anything, but keeping in mind that even when we are saying something against an injustice, if we speak too quickly, our words don't help and they create another injustice. I know it's hard to keep silent when there's injustice. I know it's hard to keep silent when the other political party is obviously going to destroy our country. I know it's hard to keep silent. But maybe, just maybe, if we are silent long enough, maybe that will start to allow God to transform our hearts, and maybe when we do speak, we will actually have something good and helpful to say into the crossfire of all those wasteful words that we see on the internet or hear on the news. Maybe we will have something worth saying that is a blessing and not a curse if we have spent time being silent and listening. So that when we do speak, maybe instead of fanning the flames by repeating the same arguments that other people are already making, maybe we can bring a different message. Maybe we can bring a message of good news. Maybe we can preach Jesus instead of judgment. Not just with our words, but with our silence and with our whole way of life. What a blessing that would be to others and to ourselves. Words are powerful, but silence is golden. Our words can create the world as we know it for good or for evil, but it is only God's word that has the power to transform our hearts. And when it does, when that happens, our words cannot help but be a blessing to all who hear them. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.